September to November, so 3 months again. And then we will follow the same principles of the first round of the SAS in launching the second round. First, it has to be easy to understand and follow. Secondly, it has to be easy to apply for. And thirdly, the disbursement must be quick, because we are talking about immediate relief or urgent relief. Now, but then we've heard of various views expressed on during the first round of the application. So for the second round, we're going to introduce some new measures. Firstly, for elderly employees. Now, for employees over the age of 65, they do not have to, or their employers rather, do not have to contribute to the MPF fund for those employees aged 65 years old or above. So we're not able to identify employees above this age. But then in the first round, actually, we've already made some improvement for employees at 65 or above. If the employers continue to contribute to the MPF on a voluntary basis, that is, if they have an active MPF account, then we will give them the wage subsidy. With the relaxation, we received 22,000 applications. Of course, the applications have to be submitted by the employers, but some 22,000 employees benefited as a result, but have been covered by these applications. But then at the end, only 16,000 employees were given the subsidy. Why is it that for the other 6,000 employees we couldn't give them subsidy? Because even though they have an MPF account, they're not making any contribution. So there's nothing in those accounts. And then so we don't know, therefore, what wages these people are receiving from the employers. So we do not know what sort of subsidy to give them. For the second round, therefore, we are now adopting a very relaxed approach. As long as the employers provide information of employees aged 65 or above with an MPF account. Now, even if that account doesn't contain any information, we will give a monthly subsidy of $5,000 to these employees. But the full amount of the subsidy must be given to the employees. So that's an improvement over the existing measures. The second improvement, now I and my colleagues have studied very carefully the industries covered by the ESS, that is, which industries are benefiting. And we believe there are two trades which are not severely hit by the epidemic, so they may not be laying off staff. For example, the large property management companies. Now they hire security guards and property management staff for residential developments and so on. And then the second sector is the supermarkets. Well, probably their business has not dropped in the past 6 months or so. Business has remained steady. So that's why in the second round of the ESAs, we will have certain requirements for these trades. Property management services companies, I'm talking about large companies. I'm not talking about the property management for, say, a single block. For property management, so large property management companies, they must return not less than 80% of the wage subsidy to the owners' corporations and other organizations managing these buildings, because it's the owners' corporations that hires a company to be the company property management. So it's actually not the property management company that's paying the wages, but rather it's the owners who pay the management fees, and that in turn, that's how employees are paid. Now we know there are a few large management companies are already doing that. For the wage subsidy they receive from the government, they give the whole amount or a large portion of the subsidy to the accounts of owners corporations, because owners corporations would have a bank account to collect management fees, and if there's a surplus of the fees, it will be saved in account for minor repairs or for procurement of supplies and so on. So we're going to impose condition that not less than 80% of wage subsidy must be given to owners corporations. It's up to them to decide how to do it. And then the second group are the two main supermarket chains. We don't want to target small or corner stores and so on. We just want to target two large supermarket chains, Parking Shop and Welcome, as they collect wage subsidies for the employees from September to November. They must offer discount to their customers, or if there are disadvantaged groups, these supermarkets must help them out and others with needs. And you could get the details later this afternoon from the other briefing. Now, of course, apart from wage, many businesses face major challenge in terms of the rental expenses. I've said this many times, that we must all fight the virus together. We want to keep jobs, so as we come off the epidemic, the economy will rebound better. Now, we're talking about, again, major developers who own large shopping malls. Here, we would like to appeal to them again strongly that they offer a rental discount to their tenants, especially those who've been hard hit by the pandemic, including those in the catering, retail, and personal services industries, including, say, travel agents. We want them to give rental relief. It could be either reduction in rent or waiver of management fees, or if tenants are unable to pay the rent on time, they would delay certain actions, such as terminating the tenancy or taking legal action, or asking the tenants to quit. So I'm making a strong appeal here again. I will be meeting personally with these owners, because some of them are actually collecting wage subsidy from the ESAs. Maybe they have reason, of course they have reason to collect the wage subsidy, but this is a time for us to stand together in fighting the virus.
And for the 2020 policy address consultation, after the NPC Standing Committee decision that the current term of LegCo will continue discharge of duties for not less than 1 year. In other words, we're still conducting the regular business at LegCo as usual. So for the fourth policy address, that will be unveiled on table to LegCo on 14th of October, and I will attend the LegCo question and answer session on the 15th of October. And since the epidemic is at the peak, although with the social distancing measures in force, and all the policy secretaries will need to concentrate on the anti-epidemic work. So the consultation for policy address will take the form of teleconferences. From next week, there will be 12 sessions, 12 thematic sessions for consultation. The invitation will be issued to the stakeholders. The general public are welcome to express the views on policy address to the Chief Executive Office by various ways. We shall issue a press release later, inform the public of the ways that they can express their views on the upcoming policy address. Sorry, we had a long statement today. Let's take questions. We're now open the floor to questions. And please put up your hand and state the media you represent and speak through the microphone to facilitate the interpretation. Cable news. So for the evening dining ban extended, the F&B industry wonder with thousands of restaurants to be closed. You decided that the impact will be less. And what condition we fulfill for and And putting conditions on welcome and parking shop would be unfair. There'll be price cut from time to time. And how do you decide who would benefit before mandating price cuts? And for the extension of the electric term, how do you see some members boycotting? Well, the government will table controversial proposals, for example, like Lantau tomorrow. And finally, the police have raided the Apple Credit headquarters and flipped through the reported deaths and drew the criticism from the reporters. And you see the national security of both press freedom. And Chris Tang claiming that allowing some press to enter the police cordon line would be a more preferential treatment. What's your view on this? First few questions. I've stressed many times that the pandemic development is a huge hit to a lot of industry, especially the harder hit industry, and have pointed out the catering industry is one of those most affected ones. Well, the most stringent measures in place so far were not able to let the catering industry do their evening trade. Well, that is quite a devastating blow to that industry. I never said that the F&B industry can cope with this, and therefore we decided to let the ban stay. That's why we have to examine the situation daily before deciding to extending the existing social distancing measure for another 7 days. In view of this pandemic, we need to be very cautious. If you recall that you see the three-way check of war: public health, economic impact, and the public acceptability. So all three forces are important. Both important is public safety. Well, the pandemic situation at the moment, we see the slight drop, but yet steadily dropping. There's still some worrying clusters. Well, the container terminal cluster and also the helper between employment are highly mobile. We're not able to cut off the transmission chain. There will be a huge consequences, and any measures that we see as easing up will give the public impression, especially a certain period that led to fatigue, that would see the government sit relaxed, decide to go out and go dine together. That will probably have a huge impact for infection control. Thus, we have made such decision. Of course, for the aspiration of the F&B industry, I'm sure they do. We'll be very happy to discuss with them. On one hand, through the ESS and also the second phase of the FEHD target industry scheme. So beyond that, what can government help? And at this time, can also step up the hygiene control measures at their establishments. By the time we can reopen, that will give the public peace of mind. On the supermarkets, well, it's hard to define them. There are big and small supermarkets. Well, for the ESS application, we see there's a major differences. Well, the other application are small amount. Therefore, it depends on how much requirements we impose on them. I don't want to create public nuisance, because the aim of the ESS is to provide timely relief to the public. As for how do we fulfill the conditions, you can discuss with Secretary Law on the details. We're also happy to listen to any suggestion. Because we had to enter phase 2 of ESS. Well, if you say that you want to impose certain conditions, we have to listen. And the third question, it's not something I can answer. To me personally, since the NPCSC have made this decision and allowing all the electrical members to continue discharge the duties, then they should come back to electrical discharge the duties. When they come back to electrical is not something I can answer for them. And the fourth question, the action the police took to enforcement in related to media, I believe that the police commissioner Chris Pang is seriously studying them. If it needs to be adjusted, the commissioner we're happy to oblige. No, that media is taking some legal action, therefore I'm not able to comment. As for the question, on whether national security law was in conflict with other freedoms enshrined in basic law, for example, press freedom and human rights. So what's the relationship? Let me reiterate that national security is a top priority of any place. If the nation is not safe, the popular livelihood is affected. Like in the idiom said, well, the country to be stable for people enjoying their stable livelihood. Well, the legislation will need to be rigorously enforced. And some of the international human rights convention would protect a lot of human rights and freedom, but some of the rights and freedoms are not without restriction. Very often, on the grounds of national security, they will be restricted by the law. And according to final appeal, the Chief Justice had mentioned most recently in the beginning amendment of the legal year, then actually not without restrictions. If excess such right would add to the social instability, they would need to be restricted by the law. So that's my take. I notice that some claim that the government should prevent the weaponization of national security law. I'm quite startled by this. The national security law is a piece of legislation or provision that protect the safety of Hong Kong and the nation. You see, as a weapon for the rule of law is punish the offenders. The national security law is hoped to deter and punish. On one hand, as prevention and also with criminal sanctions. So comparing national security law as a weapon is quite hard to understand. On the other hand, what we've seen be weaponized over the past year, we see the financial system be weaponized to impose sanctions. The social media have been weaponized for doxing. So we need this righteous national security law to deal with this and to protect the Hong Kong public safety. Next question. The lady reporter on the back row.
TVB.
I'm from TVB. Now, there's the extension of the Legislative Council for a year. Most of in the pandemic camps chose to stay on. So how are you going to work with them? What will be the focus of the work of the Legislative Council in the coming year? Can you tell us? Secondly, about Jimmy Lai's case, the National Security Department of the Hong Kong Police Force is investigating the case. Would you invite the National Security Office to intervene? Now, Jimmy Lai's case already caused public concerns of the international community. How would you respond to that? Another question is that the Bureau has issued a guideline that is for civil servants on probation. If they take part in illegal assembly and are prosecuted, they will be dismissed at once. So is that true, and what is the basis for that? Are you worried that you are presuming guilt without trial? 3 questions. So first, third one, we attach great importance to the relations of the executive and the legislature. We believe the two should work together. The legislature, of course, has constitutional powers to be a check and balance on the executive, and will continue to work with the extended legislative council in this spirit. And for work with legislators who wish to continue to serve the public. Your other question on the case, sorry, I cannot comment on it, but you asked whether the Chief Executive would invite the National Security Office to intervene in this case. Now, I'd like to point out that this is not a question of the CE making the request. It's stated clearly in the National Security Law, Article 55. There are 3 different sets of circumstances when the National Security Office would have jurisdiction. So please refer to those 3 scenarios. Another question about internationals' response to actions taken by the police. Well, it didn't start just now. In the past year, there's been, concern expressed in the international community about the work of the police. I hope you will see the hidden agenda behind such concerns. Now, even though we've delayed the elections, that's caused concerns in the international community, but other countries have done the same, and that's taken for granted. So there is double standard, and there are biased views, and there are prejudicial views in the international community, and you need to be mindful of that. Your third question is on civil servants. Civil servants are perform public duty, so we have high requirements of civil servants. All civil servants under Article 6 of the National Security must pledge allegiance to the Basic Law and the SAR. So, apart from the work performance of the civil servants and their professional expertise, and we also have high expectations of their conduct, and so this measure targets in particular people on probation. It's like when an employer hires someone on probation, that means it's a period to observe the performance of that employee on various aspects to see whether it's in line with the expectations of the employer. So as the SAR government, we are an employer, and we have certain expectations of our staff, as I mentioned. So how they perform and how they conduct themselves, and what views they express, if that's going to detract from the image of the SAR government, of course, we have every reason to not to keep the person in employment. It's not a question of presumption of guilt. It's a matter of employment.
Question number one, do you actually have a concrete plan in saving the businesses or restaurants that are to make sure that they can survive now that the social distancing measures are extended for another week? As many of them have said, they are now on life support and they cannot survive any longer. And how soon, in your opinion, that the new anti-epidemic fund 3.0 can roll out? And also a question about sanctions from the United States. How are you going to promote Hong Kong to US businesses or even other overseas business if you are not welcome overseas? How should the international community see Hong Kong as a whole when its leader or other officials are not welcome? Are not welcome there. And also about the new recruits, you mentioned that new recruits who are arrested or charged will have their contracts terminated. Why are you only targeting people arrested in illegal public activities rather than other offenses like theft? Thank you.
Thank you for the three questions. Now, first is we are still in a very severe situation as far as the COVID-19 epidemic is concerned. There are several indicators which do not give us that sense of comfort that this is a time for relaxation of these social distancing measures. One is we have not seen a downward trend yet. Yes, the number of cases has reduced to 2 digits instead of 3 digits half a month ago, but they are still fluctuating from one day to another day. And secondly, is we are seeing some worrying clusters emerging. One is at the container port, involving maybe thousands of workers. The other is in the dorms resided in by the foreign domestic helpers when they are changing jobs while in Hong Kong. Third is our testing has not been as comprehensively or as speedily as we would like to see. So with these factors, it is simply not possible to do significant relaxation. And also by the same token, it would be very difficult for me as a chief executive to give you a plan on when the epidemic will go away. I don't think any leaders of any governments, including the World Health Organization, could do that sort of projection. In fact, the more common way of saying it, until an effective vaccine is discovered and produced and widely applied, we probably will have to live with this virus for pretty long time under what we call a new normal circumstances. Now, many industries are hard hit by this epidemic, especially those providing hospitality, catering, tourism, and personal services because of the social distancing measures. And of course, the 16,000 eatery outlets in Hong Kong are amongst the hard-hit sectors. That's why in AEF 1.0 and 2.0, we always have an item for the catering industry. And this has been welcomed by the sector when the particular measures were introduced. We will engage the sector and try to come up with measures that we would provide them with more relief so that we could all preserve our capacity and to wait for the economy to come back. When will AEF 3.0 roll out? On the last two occasions, as an indicator, I wouldn't say this is a commitment. We take about 3 weeks from announcement to funding approval by Finance Committee. I understand that the Legislative Council President and the Chairman of the House Committee have decided to convene a special meeting of a House Committee on the 28th of August to discuss our anti-epidemic work. So that will be about 10 days from now. So hopefully we will be able to present some proposals for discussion and thereafter take the case to a Finance Committee for approval. Because there's no way that we could meet those additional requirements from the contingency that I used to tell you. There used to be a contingency within the AEF 2.0, but that contingency has also been more or less exhausted over the last few weeks. Now, sanctions. These sanctions are totally unjustified, and we will take up some of those sanctions, especially those involving trade, because Hong Kong is a separate member of the World Trade Organization. To be mistreated by another member of the World Trade Organization bridges the rules and regulations of this international body. So we will take up with the World Trade Organization against those sanctions. But your question's focus seems to be on myself. If I'm being sanctioned by America, I couldn't go to the US. How could I do overseas promotion? To be very honest with you, since taking office in 2017, I have not been to the United States. I have been planning, but I have not been to one. Partly is because in 2016, as the Chief Secretary, I have done a very extensive US official trip covering 3 cities of San Francisco, New York, and Washington, D.C. Now, without a physical visit by the leader of the government doesn't mean that we could not do overseas promotion work. We still have 3 economic and trade offices in America, and we have our Invest Hong Kong arms, which will be very happy to introduce Hong Kong strengths, especially in the Greater Bay Area, in the financial services to U.S. companies interested in setting up their business in Hong Kong, and we can also work through the chambers. But I hope that in asking that question, you too will feel that the leader of this government has been mistreated by the U.S. administration. But that never mind. As I said, despite some inconvenience in my my personal affairs, that is nothing that I will take to heart at all. We will continue to do what is right for the country and for Hong Kong. Now, new recruits, i.e. the probationers. One is civil servants are public officers. And we have very high expectations of every member of the civil service. They have to, under the national security law, to pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and to uphold the basic law. So they are subject to a more stringent set of standards, and I would advise that whoever wants to join the civil service of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, they have to make sure that they can fulfill those requirements. So in terms of management of the civil service, of course, recruitment is important, so we bring in the right people. Secondly is the probation period is very important. We want to observe these civil servants to ensure that they meet the high standards that I have just described. Because once they move on to confirmation, our rules and regulations make it very difficult for us to dismiss a sort of permanent employment civil service. So this time around, the Civil Service Bureau has focused on the probationers. So advising the heads of departments to make sure that they are monitoring and observing not only the performance of the probationers on the job, but also their conduct, their other behaviors, to make sure that they will be good enough to continue to serve the people of Hong Kong, being an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China. 好，多謝晒各位。
Thank you very much.